Hey guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Millennial Mirrors, a discussion on millennial life in the Middle East. So today's episode is actually recorded for video. It's our first time doing this, so I'm super kind of psyched about it. And I'm joined with Majid Al Qassimi.
Thank you very much.
He's a good friend who's listened to all the episodes and is here to discuss them all with me. This episode is a kind of a retrospect, so we're going to go back throughout all the episodes and kind of talk about the highlights, talk about what we found interesting, and the main points that we thought were kind of cool about each episode. So let's jump into it. Before we do that, though, do you want to tell people a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Majid Al Qassimi. I am actually trained as a veterinarian as my profession, but I work in government. I really a biologist at heart, and the way the natural world and the world we live in and how that works together has always been a curiosity of mine. I loved the series or the season of Millennial Mirrors because there was a lot of people that I identified with.
Yeah.
It was super exciting to hear about people I didn't know about. And on top of that, so much to learn. And if anybody's gotten this far in the season, or if you haven't, go back, listen to it all, because I think there's a lot to be gained from all the guests.
Go back and listen to the episodes, guys. Even if you heard them, go back and listen again. I don't mind.
I've listened to one or two twice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool. I've listened to them a lot because I edit them. All right, so let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
Episode 1 is with Sara Al-Madani, and the title is Abe. And we talk about kind of the word Abe, how it's used in our culture, and how we hear it from when we were kids growing up, and kind of how it affects how we live our lives. So what did you think?
Oh, I loved Sarah's episode. I'd never heard of her or her background, and so it was a completely new person for me to learn about. And right off the bat, one of my favorite quotes was, "Failure is what drove me towards success."
Right.
And I cannot emphasize enough how important this is today. The importance of using failure as a sort of springboard, a learning experience. I think you really fail if you're not learning from the failure.
Right.
So if you have an experience, a failure, and from that, even using the pain to sort of actualize that something is not right, and then you can learn from that, is critical, and it propels her. And the idea is, we see too much today on maybe social media and in our peers, everybody's successes, and not enough of our failures. And I love the idea of celebrating your failures personally, to say, okay, I got here, it didn't work, why? And how can I improve? How can I learn? And I've had plenty of my own experiences in that respect.
I think also people will relate to you more if you're more open about your failures, because failure is part of the human experience, and you kind of have to stop being so ashamed of it and kind of afraid of it, which I think a lot of people here are and kind of need to kind of get over.
I think in our culture, whether it's Abe to fail or the idea is to share that is interesting for me. I've been fortunate in my experience growing up that wasn't, Abe wasn't used so much, maybe when I was a toddler and I was doing something that wasn't appropriate.
Right.
But growing up, failure and adversity really has sort of, I've grown out and through those challenges.
Right.
The one thing that she's doing very successfully is really making it okay to fail. And unfortunately, people feel it's not okay, or it's shameful, it might be shame to my family. Quite the opposite. If you can fail and fail well, you've got a lot of opportunity there.
So how do you use the word Abe at home with your kids?
So I don't.
Okay.
Abe isn't really anything that I would use. I think what we're trying to do is promote positive actions and attitudes. I think also teaching them, that failure is okay is important. And also, it's one thing that I want to make sure is that my kids aren't sort of always winning. The importance of losing gracefully. When I played rugby or basketball, we were taught that when you lose a game, you clap the team off the pitch.
Yeah.
And we used to like line up in the tunnel,
really cool.
and you clap them off. And then what the winning team does is they line up right after you and clap you off. And it was about winning gracefully.
Yeah.
It's about keeping your head high. You gave it your best. And I think a lot of people, whether it's through that kind of experience or another, could do with failing with their head held up high.
The other thing that we talk about also in the episode, which I think is relevant, is the fact that Abe is relevant.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, relative.
Relative, right?
Relative, not relevant. Yeah, relative. Because of the fact that what's considered Abe is completely dependent on how you're raised and your family, and so I think a lot of the time people use Abe instead of wrong. Yeah. And right and wrong are very kind of specific things. Yeah. And then Abe is this gray area where a lot of things kind of get lumped in. Yeah. And you end up not really knowing how to navigate it. You know what I mean?
I think that's a challenge in that Abe is sort of like a moving gray area as well. Like things are either becoming Abe or not, and in that maybe it doesn't help. I think conversation around it is important, so that you can like untangle and sort of really dissect what in there is maybe inappropriate or not accepted. And as culture changes, those definitions might change.
Yeah, I think it's important for when you're deciding whether or not to do something, because it's Abe, is to actually sit down and look at it objectively and be like, is this wrong? Yeah. Or is this just Abe? Okay, if it's Abe, then how do I feel about that situation? Do I feel that it's Abe for me, or is it just something that's kind of being pushed on me by X, Y, or Z? You know what I mean?
And Sarah was saying this, it's important to be yourself. Yeah. Okay? And you shouldn't be ashamed of that. Yeah, and I think that the challenge there is if people are getting Abe sort of put around everything, that they maybe feel of themselves ashamed that, maybe this is an interest of mine, you know, whether it's music or otherwise, that things aren't appropriate. It can be difficult then to be happy with who you are or what your interests are, what you like to do.
Because you're ashamed.
Yeah, because you're ashamed.
Yeah, and that's just... I'll actually read the quote. She said,
please do.
You gotta be you. There is nothing to be ashamed of. And if you don't fit in, if you're weird, if you're different, I'm pretty sure someone out there would love you for who you are, and not everyone you meet should be someone that loves you.
There's some serious wisdom in that. Yeah. There's some serious... I think the society, and when we're meeting people, the idea of everybody must love me or I need to appeal to everybody is very difficult, because you can't make everybody happy.
That's true.
And I think the most important person to make happy is yourself. And to understand that you're being authentic and true to yourself. And Sarah, I think, embodies that when she talks. You can hear it with worth. It's very good to hear. And it also was her attitude with women being inspired.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
she said a woman that is inspired is a dangerous creature. You can't stop her. And the idea of empowerment versus inspiration. Yeah. I think any person who's inspired will go beyond themselves. I mean, that's what inspiration is. You feel you are greater than yourself, greater than you are capable of, and you push through some self-limitations.
And it's very hard to feel inspired if you're feeling ashamed of who you are. Yeah, that's a very hard space to hold. So I think kind of working through that and figuring it out is a very kind of important thing that you need to do for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was Saad Al-Madani's episode on Abe. Definitely give it a listen if you guys haven't already. It's a really, really cool episode. And yeah, that's it. So episode 2 is That's Just the Way It Is. It was with the guys from Naqashna, Mohammed Nseba and Nizar Saleh. They run like a really cool debate platform in Kuwait where they have like very awesome debates about controversial topics.
I was very impressed by this. It was brave. I think it was important, and to be doing it in such a public forum. Really, I was in awe of the guys and the whole Naqashna platform. That was really cool.
So, what was your favorite part?
Just the stories of the debates were cool. I stopped the car and I listened to the episode to the end because I wanted to hear it all. I think it was like on my home commute home, but just the way things work out here, you're doing something important. You're bringing a conversation into the public sphere. Right. You're illustrating, or at least highlighting, the importance of having the conversation, and you're giving equal measure to both sides of the debate.
Yeah.
I think what was more so impressive was how then those debates were handled, so that there was even spacing essentially between the two sides, and allowing people to exchange ideas in a safe forum. And I think that is critical if we're going to move culture and going to be allowing for growth. And it's a very mature approach. So again, my hat's off to them.
I think what I really liked, and it was he I think it was Muhammad who said it. It was, we think that our circles are a microcosm of society, but that's far from the truth, because we tend to hang out with people who are very much like us. And so you assume everyone thinks the same way, and it's only when you kind of go out and you talk to people outside your circle that you realize people think quite differently. So that's kind of what I love about what they're doing, because the fact that they bring two very, very opposite perspectives. And sometimes the person arguing that perspective doesn't actually believe that perspective, but they will come, they will research the arguments, and they will go in there and kind of talk about it, and then you have the audience participation, which just gets...
I thought they were like adding sparks to it. It's really exciting to be able to... I know when I do public speaking, I'm tired of that one-directional conversation, and it's important that people get the opportunity to engage with a speaker, with the debaters, or whoever's on the stage, because it becomes a conversation, and that's when the real exchange of ideas happens.
And I think that's definitely something very kind of indicative of our generation, because we're used to two-way communication. We're used to things being very, very interactive. So someone just speaking at me is just not going to do it for me at the end of the day anymore.
I think something I've noticed with public speaking is that you'll find a lot of the time, and I say this to when I'm in a meeting or when I'm on in front of a public, where there is no such thing as a stupid question. But half the people are thinking their question is. But if one brave soul will ask, then everybody gets the opportunity to share in the answer. And I think that's really important for being able to ask questions that you weren't sure you could ask or was appropriate to ask, or feel embarrassed, and just in that public forum, everybody's gaining, everybody's learning. And I think that's, how can you put a measure on that? It's really valuable.
I think also people need to learn to have conversations.
That's true.
I think like a lot of the time people are just not having these difficult conversations. They're not asking they're not asking questions. They're just kind of sitting there with their own opinion, their own fears, their own like judgments about situations, and not necessarily talking about it, which I think is kind of very much an issue.
I think you put your finger on the idea of the conversation it's not just about talking in the conversation, it's about listening as well. To be able to be receptive, naturally curious, to have your ears and mind open to what is being said, to understand that the party across from you, whether it's in a debate, a conversation, or a discussion of a topic, has a perspective that's built on their own experiences. And so you have to respect that and learn to be inquisitive naturally, and not ask questions that are sort of prodding in a sense that I'm going to get my opinion to come out of you, but to say, I really want to understand why you think that way, why you believe that, and that exchange really just grows your understanding of the world.
That's true. So the title was That's Just the Way It Is, and it talks about kind of how so much of the time in our culture, people are just saying that's just the way it is, and no one wants to kind of like step outside of the comfort zone. No one wants to kind of change what they're doing. And one of the quotes from the episode was, maybe part of the culture is to stay in your comfort zone. What's your reaction to that?
That doesn't ring for me. I mean, staying in your comfort zone, and culture is something familiar, at least in the generation that's building that culture, whether it's sitting around a fire, having a conversation, or being with family regularly. If that's part of your culture, sure, that familiarity is great. But when it changes because there are new inputs to the person or to the community. So when you're talking about just that's the way it is and it's static, or it exists in this moment, that means you're not venturing outside of the culture, the circle. You're not learning anything, at least in the sense that you're learning anything new that could be added to the culture. And I think that's an important point, is that and they said it themselves, it was culture is not a static thing.
Right.
The idea that culture, as you go back, and I think historians have a good perspective on this, is that they see how ideas of the time, when new things come to a culture, whether it's, us in this region, we're traders in our background. We've been engaged with people outside of our countries, and even today, we're a melting pot of so many global citizens.
Yeah.
Culture is going to change, and you cannot hold that back.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing is, how do you navigate that?
Right.
How do you openly and without judgment be able to converse about it?
I think also the whole statement of not doing something because you're afraid of judgment from the culture, and because you're like, this is not appropriate in our culture, is something which I think is, you need to kind of take a step back and really think about using that as a reason, because at the end of the day, our culture today is not what our culture was when our parents were our age. And if no one took any steps outside of what culture is, then culture would never change and shift. So you kind of have to stop using it as an excuse, in my opinion, at least.
I think one of the guys was talking about how back in the day, if you were sort of, you could be ostracized or sort of like exiled for not following the culture, and that meant life or death.
Yeah.
And now there's a serious way up of how do I make it through the day, through the year, especially in the environment we live in here. It's quite challenging with resources, etc. Today, we have more access to resources, quality of life, but I think it's natural still to be concerned where you might do something that puts you outside of the circle, and you're looking back in. Now, I think it's in every individual's perception of whether that is a difficult thing or that's a scary thing, or can they live outside of the circle, and at the same time, that alone has its own conversation. Yeah. But there are so many circles. Today you go between your friends at the Diwani or the Majlis, and then you go and you see your friends who are like playing at the sports club. Might not be the same people. And then you go to work and there's a different group of people. And so you have these micro circles, if you will, and you move between them. And even those cross-pollinate.
True.
So I think we're getting a sort of mishmash of more circles, if you will. There's less, the one circle and you're outside, but you move between circles.
I think, and I think what I would take away from that ad is if fear is what's stopping you from doing things, at the end of the day, like you're scared of losing your circle, know that at this point in time, you have so much access to information and people that you will find another circle that is more accepting of what you want to do and who you are and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of your life if you lose this one circle you're part of.
I think there the fear is, what do I lose for the gain?
Yeah.
And some people honestly have that fear of losing their family or losing the respect of their peers.
That's true.
And so I think there the challenge is you're sitting in between this and you're trying to weigh this up. Like, I really want to do X, but I lose their respect. Everybody has that challenge in their own self to deal with. But I think, as you're saying, social media, globalization, and the like, you've got so many other places that you can share your interests, and whether it's a hobby or you'll find your peers, essentially.
You'll find your tribe.
You'll find your tribe.
So that was episode 2. Guys, definitely check out Naqashna's Instagram account. They have some really cool debates and points, so definitely go check it out. So episode 3 is Because I Said So, and for this episode we had Zahid Sultan, who is a social entrepreneur and an artist. What did you think of this episode?
I like the fact that you had an artist on the show. Okay. Really interesting challenge to be doing something that maybe in our society isn't at first glance. Oh, you're not an engineer? Oh, you're not a doctor? Yeah. And I can attest to what that is like when you pick a career. So
how was that for you?
Well, you tell everybody like, oh, I'm going to be a veterinarian, and they go, oh, like an animal doctor? And you go, yeah. And they go, so you're going to be with the animals all the time? You go, kinda.
Yeah.
And there's this expectation like, oh, he's a doctor, but but he's with the animals. And I think it's a matter of ignorance where people don't understand the value you're bringing to society, whether it's as a veterinarian or an artist, what you're doing and contributing in terms of value. So I like the idea. I mean, I play music. I have my own pursuits as well. Right. But to hear somebody who's doing it full time was super exciting.
I think the reason I brought Zahid on was because of the fact that I really wanted to discuss that idea of kind of emotional independence and intellectual independence, where you think for yourself and you can take decisions for yourself, and you can also kind of maintain your emotional well-being without necessarily being fully dependent on your family or your society or your circle. And I think he does that quite well.
He not only demonstrated it well, but I like the idea of where he was saying, find comfort in discomfort.
Yeah.
And immediately it brought me back to when I went to university, and where for the first time you are literally on your own, and you're like, okay, well, what do I do next? And you sort of making it through the day and understanding you don't have all the comforts from back home. You are fully responsible for yourself day to day. You have to feed yourself. You have to get your clothes washed and the like. And you have to make sure you're getting in and out of, no more parents around you. That's quite an important period of growth for anybody, that transition of leaving the home.
Right.
There as an artist going abroad, the idea is also like double, tripled, where you're like, okay, it's not just university. It's not like, and now I have to pay the bills. Now I have to make ends meet.
Yeah.
Now I have to make what I do and how that reconciles with my day-to-day fit on a daily basis. And I'm very impressed by the journey, and it was super exciting to listen to him talk.
I think what's also kind of difficult for us in our culture and society is that you kind of graduate from university and then you move back home and you're kind of brought back right into the fold, right? So to a certain extent, I feel like it might be easier to maintain your emotional independence and your intellectual independence and make decisions for yourself when you're not kind of right back at home right after university and you're suddenly part of the family unit and people are discussing every single decision you're making, kind of.
So there's, I think, reconciling that independence abroad, or even if you're in the country but you're staying at a university at dorms or whatever, and then you're back home and suddenly you have to follow and fit. There's always going to be friction. Yeah. Let's be honest. It's not like you come back and everything's high fives. Yeah. But at the same time, that growth is important personally. I think also what you can essentially demonstrate in that independence can also contribute to the family.
Yeah.
So it's not that you come back and you're this rebel. Quite the opposite. You can now do X, Y, and Z for the family. You become... I think the challenge is the psychology of returning to the child state. I mean, you come back and you're, boy number 3 in the family. And you have older siblings or younger siblings, and you follow the set patterns, maybe.
The hierarchy,
the pecking order. But at the same time, if you start work or you start a career of any sorts and you start building that independence in whatever form that exists here, getting the recognition of your brothers and sisters, of your friends, of your parents. They will always be your mom and dad, but you bring new attributes, and the change is stark. I know when any of my brothers have come back from university, 3 months, 6 months, and suddenly they're completely different people. I think it's exciting for a family if they understand that that's for the betterment of their children, of their siblings, and how that changes when you interact. I've watched all my brothers grow up, and it's been exciting for me to see.
So what about the idea of deprogramming that he talks about?
It's hard for me to speak about deprogramming because I've lived a sort of very traditional upbringing in the Middle East. So for me, actually, there's part of that is a curiosity to what my experience is different to others. But at the same time, we all go through our own deprogramming of what the status quo at home might be or the culture might be. So when you're talking about you come back and it's expected. I don't know if this was in that episode about the Diwani. You're like expected to turn up there now every weekend. Different friends change. You go and you bring new experiences. You have new interests, and suddenly maybe friends are less engaged on certain topics, some are more, or you find a new group because of an experience you had. I don't know if it's a deprogramming or rather modifying the program. Deprogramming is talking about like sort of removing and stripping things out, or.
Well, I think for him it was one of those things where he talks about how when you're born, depending on your family and what your parents do and your family name and all these things kind of get put into you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all these expectations kind of get put into you, and of what you're supposed to be.
Sure.
And then it's a matter of kind of growing up and then thinking, okay, wait, all this stuff that has been put into me since I was born, now I need to decide kind of like, does this match up, or do I need to kind of like remove some of these things in order to kind of
I don't believe you can remove, and like to pick on that point, if you've been brought up, and I'm talking about like from year one, and these things are pretty much part of your psychology, the way you grow up to become a human being.
Right.
To remove them, to strip them out, I almost think is impossible. But what does happen is you look at them in yourself and you say, okay, this is how I grew up. This is my background. This is what my parents wanted to give for me. I mean, it's like that whole experience of seeing yourself do something. You go, oh my God, I'm my dad. Exactly. Or you go, oh, my mom is like this. They're almost innate. I mean, this learned behavior and the like. I think the important thing is, can you turn those things into strengths? Yeah. What do they mean, and how do you work with them or grow with them? It sounds almost destructive, and I think that's maybe why I'm not sort of syncing up with it. It's like this deep, like we go in and then wipe it down, format the drive and everything. Yeah. I think it's important to see all the benefits that our upbringing gave us. Yeah. And there are things that I do now, like the way I laugh. The way I laugh, everybody goes, "Yeah, laugh like your dad." And that it might almost sound like, oh, well, that's embarrassing. But no, quite the opposite. I think it's charming because I remember my father's laugh all the time. Yeah. And that then is a positive thing.
That's true.
So I'm wary of using the idea of deprogramming. Reprogramming or modifying.
Or modifying,
We're getting updates.
Updates,
exactly.
Hopefully not as glitchy as iOS's updates, but still. All right, guys. So that's Zahid Sultan's episode. That's Because I Said So. Check it out if you haven't listened to it already. So episode 4 is I Just Want to Make an Impact, and it was with Omar Shannar, where we talked about kind of the idea of how everyone now wants to make an impact and feels like they really want to make a difference, but a lot of people are kind of very disillusioned in their jobs and what they're doing because they don't feel like they're making impact. So I know you know Omar personally.
Yes, I do.
So what did you think of the episode?
I love the episode.
Well, you have to say that. You know him.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's going to watch this later. No, Omar's really cool. He's got a really awesome energy, and he's got a lot of experience to speak from. The one thing that when he was talking about purpose and impact actually not being sort of strategic targets, that blew me away. I realize a lot of people talk about impact, including myself. I want to make an impact. Right. But how do you sort of measure that up day to day? And it's really got me thinking. I don't know if I've got the answer to it, but at least that's prompted my mind to think about where my impact is, how people should be defining impact, and with that, their happiness. It was definitely a lot to ruminate on, so I may go back and listen to it.
The fact that he kind of made impact and figuring out what impact you want to make a studied decision.
Yes.
So it wasn't like this vague concept of I want to make a difference and I want to make an impact. He kind of literally sat down and was like, all right, what is the impact that I can make? All right, let me look at percentages and economic statistics and blah, blah, blah. All right, this is kind of how I want to go about it.
I think there he's speaking from experience.
Yeah.
If you can measure impact, then you know how you're doing. And I think that's, if anybody was to pick their own sort of impact and say, okay, what is it? Do I impact one person's life? How do you impact it? How far does that impact go? What is the key sort of indicator that you've made the impact?
Right.
I think you can get lost in being able to define that. But if the exercise helps you line yourself up, then that's you've gained a lot from that.
I also think it was really cool that, because we also talked about impact on a personal level, so that not everyone at the end of the day wants to make this huge impact. Sometimes impact can be on a personal level. You can be like a mother, you can, just be a really good friend, you can be whatever. And I think it's also about thinking about what you want to do and what means something to you.
I think it's a really good point that you make, because impact to somehow be sort of attached only to a profession seems a bit one-sided. I'd hope that everybody could make an impact personally. In whatever they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's a passion project, whether it's something they feel very important, whether they want to be able to just make the world around them, whether that's their immediate family, their society, make an impact there. That's critical.
I think even in coaching, when I'm working with a client and we're talking about life purpose and the impact they want to make, it's always one of those things where we look at it in a holistic view, where don't look at it as how you want to lead your life in general. Look at it as kind of creating a North Star for yourself and how you want to act in your personal life, how you want to act in your day-to-day life, how you want to act in work. What are the kind of things you say yes to and no to, rather than a vision statement of a company. Because you're a human being at the end of the day, and you need to be aligned all the way throughout, from your kind of profession to your personal life.
Quick question. Do you find that people are saying to you, I want to make an impact in my professional life, but I can only do it in my personal life, and how do I translate that? Or vice versa. I'm doing something at work that is trying to make an impact, but I don't know how to translate that into my personal life.
So I find that the way that most of us are kind of taught to think about things is to segment it. What I do when I'm working with clients is we actually remove it from those kind of realms, and we start with kind of what their values are. What are the things that are most important to them? And then we craft a holistic kind of life purpose statement or impact statement for them that covers all aspects to help them kind of then from there think about, okay, what do you want to do in your professional life? And what do you want to do in your personal life, rather than going about it backwards. Because it starts with you. What matters to you? What do you value most? What are the things that kind of make you resonate as a human being, kind of thing, and then from there work towards career and personal, rather than the other way around.
Cool. That does, and I find actually it was something that Omar said about we only hear about 5% that made it. I think that's playing a big part in the equation through social media, through the news, that everybody is taking the peak of the mountain or the tip of the iceberg and going, wow, they made it, and so do I. And what isn't clear, what isn't seen is, and I guess that's part of how social media works. You're getting snippets, snapshots, pictures of where things are today. I know when I'm doing, one of my hobbies is woodwork, but when I'm watching woodwork, you see this really quick video of how somebody puts something together. Just try and trim out a piece of wood into 4 square. That takes hours, and you don't understand that until you've gotten stuck in, and it can be very demotivating and almost thinking like, wow, I can never make an impact if I'm stuck here.
And I also think everyone kind of has now these Zuckerbergian levels of what impact needs to be, and a lot of the time, for example, even when I'm hiring and I'm interviewing like fresh grads, and I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to have a business or an app that that blows up and becomes huge, and they start throwing out these examples of things that are done. And I'm like, okay, no, but like, what difference do you want to make? And they have no idea. They don't know what the idea is. They're just like, I need to find that one idea that's going to make me that huge kind of.
I think I don't know if that's impact, or rather they just want to be unicorns. Like the idea, and they're romanticizing the idea of being that breakout hit. What with a lot of what people don't see is that while you're doing 20 other things, the person that made it spent all those hours doing the one thing they're good at, and putting the hours in, and really that's the work. And some of it's timing, some of it's the opportunity.
That's true.
But I think where both what Omar was highlighting there, and both you want to make an impact understand how big that is. But the other, it's going to take a lot more failure or experience and trials to get to that success point.
And to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, and figure out, because you don't want to be toiling in a direction that's not going to get you in the end where you are. And I think that's what a lot of people, I think they're enamored with the end goal.
Rather than the
they
journey.
Don't understand the journey. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you're all unicorns to me. All right, so that's episode 4, Amr Shinnar, which is titled "I Just Want to Change the World." He actually has some really cool points, guys, because he's quite experienced. And
he has a really cool Instagram account. I'm sorry, I really enjoy watching his stories.
Yeah, his stories are fun for sure. Cool, so also go follow him. So thank you, Majid, for being with me today.
My pleasure.
This was really, really fun.
No, this is cool.
Guys, we actually split the episode into 2 this week because of the fact that it's just too long to have as one episode. So come back next week to hear the rest of the episodes we discuss in next week. Sorry, we've been talking for a long time, so I'm a bit out of it. But yeah, come back next week and join us for the second half of the episode. And this is wrapping up, guys. So I'm going to be starting to work on season 2. So if you have any ideas for topics or anything you want to talk about, definitely send them in. You know where my Instagram is and you know what my Twitter is. It's at Mshari Alonaizy, and you'll find the links in the episode description. Cool. Bye, guys. Stay safe.